So, good evening, everyone. My name is Tarun, and I'm going to talk about how Bitcoin works. First of all, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. What is a cryptocurrency? You can see here that it's a list of transactions, and this list of transactions is working as a currency. But how is that possible? How can a list of transactions work as a currency? Look, for that, we'll just look at an example. Imagine a poker game, but instead of playing with chips, we maintain a transactions list. Instead of having chips, individual players, we'll write down how much individual player is starting with. And whenever a player has to transfer money, they'll add the transaction to the list. And going through the list, you can verify if the player has enough credits or not. While playing the game, we can even have real world transactions using the same list. For example, John can sell a water bottle to Bob for 20 credits. All we need to do is add that to the ledger, and a transaction has happened with this currency. So we can call this credit on this ledger as a currency. So how is this ledger stored? It is stored in a blockchain. So a blockchain works in a blockchain, instead of storing all the transactions in a long list, a bunch of transactions are stored in a block, and individual blocks are linked together with cryptographic hashes. I know everyone knows what a hash, but a cryptographic hash is like a fingerprint for a data. Given an input of data, it gives a unique output string, and that will change even with a minute change in the input data. You can see only a full stop has changed, and the hash has changed drastically. So here, what we do is every block has a hash. The data in the block is hashed. It's added to the bottom, and the next block will contain the previous block's hash. So like that, all the blocks in the chain are linked together with their hashes. And that's why it's called a blockchain, simple. Blockchain is a peer-to-peer system. Every peer has his own copy of the ledger. Because it's an anonymous system, we don't want to trust other people to maintain it, we maintain it ourselves. How it works is that when a user wants to make a transaction, that is when they want to add a transaction to the list, they'll broadcast the transaction to the network. This goes into a pool, and there are peers called miners. They collect these transactions from the pool and make blocks, collate them into blocks. These blocks are broadcasted back to the network, and peers in the network can add it to their personal copy of the blockchain. But this has lots of problems, like what is stopping people from adding fake transactions and validity of the blocks, and there is really no incentive for making the blocks right now. And so we'll see how Bitcoin actually solves all these problems. First thing is fake transactions. What we do is, when making a transaction, we create a signature. The user has a private key and a public key. So a transaction contains a message, right? This person is transferring money to this person. That is signed. That is, it goes through a hash function and produces a signature. And the signature can be easily verified by providing the public key. So we know that a user has signed it. So it provides a functionality to validate transactions, because the same sign cannot be used for another transaction. If the recipient changes, the sign changes. And also, if the row number changes, again, the signature changes. So the same person cannot duplicate the transaction again. Next is proof of work. This validates a block of data. So Bitcoin chooses to consider a block valid if it has a valid nonce. Nonce is a special number that, when hashed along with the block data, should give you a hash that starts with a predetermined number of zeros. Let's say 30 zeros. The only way to find that nonce number is to guess through different numbers and hash them to find a number that comes up with a 30 starting hash. So when a valid nonce is present, it's like it has done the work. And generally, the difficulty is adjusted every 2 weeks, so that the average time to mine a block is around 10 minutes. And sometimes it can happen that a peer can receive 2 different blocks at the same time. When both of them are valid, how to choose which one is the valid block? What Bitcoin does is it waits for another block to be received. It looks at which chain the block belongs to and considers that chain as the valid chain. And finally, mining. So we know that mining is to find a valid nonce number, but that is computationally intensive. Why would anyone want to do that? To incentivize that, a miner can get to add a special transaction that rewards him an amount of bitcoins. So new bitcoins are created and the miner gets those bitcoins. This transaction is called a coin-based transaction, and every 4 years that amount is halved. It is to do with economics. If the value keeps decreasing, it creates scarcity and increases value. So because it's halving every 4 years, by 2140, it will reach approximately 0. But then even after that point of time, miners will still continue mining it because there is a transaction fee associated with transactions. And that transaction fee will go to the miners. So a quick recap is that we have seen what cryptocurrency is, how the ledger works as a currency. We've seen how is it stored. It's stored in a blockchain. And we have seen how Bitcoin uses cryptography to validate all the transactions. Also, it's important to mention that there are 1,000+ cryptocurrencies and they use different strategies to validate their blockchains. And some of them might use different strategies. So what are the advantages of cryptocurrencies? It is a direct peer-to-peer transfer. There are no banks or governments involved if you don't trust your bank or government. There is a low transaction fee. You can choose to give 0 transaction fee for your Bitcoin transaction. Your Bitcoin account cannot be frozen and there are no arbitrary limits. Disadvantages are no legal backing. If you get hacked, you can't really do anything about it. If you lose your private key, if you lose your wallet, there is no way to recover it. It's not widely accepted. People won't buy you stuff, won't sell you stuff for Bitcoins very regularly. And it is slow in Bitcoin because it takes 10 minutes to validate a Bitcoin. And these are my references. Any questions?
You said the mining block, it takes 10 minutes just to guess that nonce number.
Yeah.
So that is the reason why miners set up huge machines
Yeah.
to run that algorithm, find that number fast. So that's why you need to be a proper miner.
Yeah.
Or is it also dependent on the network that you are in?
No, it depends on your personal machine. The bigger the number you...
So if I am currently sitting in here, so for example, assume that there is a block in UK or US region on the other side of the planet. Can I be able to validate that block?
So it goes into a pool. All the transactions go into a pool, and miners will pick up transactions from the pool to validate. It doesn't matter where the physical
location is. Basically, whatever pool I am, only from that thing I can...
It goes into a global pool. There is no individual pool.
So I can pick...
Yeah. There's nothing stopping you from mining those transactions. Okay. Any other questions? None. Bitcoin is created through these mining. Whenever a person mines, they get a reward. And this is how all the Bitcoins are created. Yeah, all the Bitcoins in existence are created with this reward itself. You can buy it from another person or you can mine it yourself.
I have heard of cases where people get like partial Bitcoins. So, I mean, how is that done? That this is actually miners getting partial coins.
So instead of...
according to this slide, anyone who mines, who validates a block should actually get $12.5.
Yeah.
But how can people get, let's say...
So generally, people mine in pools. They contribute to a mining pool so that if the pool finds a Bitcoin, it will be distributed amongst all the people in that pool. It increases your chances of getting a fraction of the reward. If you have a big machine, you can do it alone, but generally people mine in pools. Yeah.
I don't think people can mine at home.
Not at home.
These days.
Any other questions?